Hey, I too want to thank the presidents and the students for an open and honest conversation. It's so important to get your voices at the table. And we at the Equity Champions Coalition, of course, we value the input from your institutional representatives and students as well. And that helps us be partners in the work and keep this moving. We are building momentum, and today is one of those days that we're really activating the full potential of what can happen going forward. So now it's time for us to take action as we transition to the signing of the Equity Pledge. And so to start us off, I want to welcome my friend and the governor, Jared Polis, who's going to provide us with his remarks and then lead us through the signing ceremony. Governor, welcome.
Thank you, Angie. Great to catch the tail end of your remarks. And I want to take a few moments to thank everybody who helped make today happen, and especially everybody who put in a lot of time to complete the report on educational equity. I want to thank the Colorado Department of Higher Education, the Colorado Equity Champions, including David Olguin and student advisor, and Dr. Ryan Ross, and so many others. We had some great legislative leaders that helped us get here. Representative Kipp, Bacon, Herod, McCluskey, Valdez, Nick Kipp, Lundeen, and Bridges, and Office of Educational Equity members, Equity Champions Coalition, and so many others. We're also being joined by Dr. Will Del Pilar from the Education Trust, and a number of students, Dylan Mills, Eduardo Mendoza Vega, Enrique Benavides, and Nikki Larzo. Thank you for sharing your stories with us. As many of you know, I've spent a lot of my career in public service championing access to education and quality education for everybody at all levels of education. Really, education is the passport to opportunity. And no matter where you live, no matter what your economic background is or your race, you should have every opportunity that this amazing state and amazing country have to offer. Since becoming governor, I'm proud of the progress we've made so far. We extended free full-day kindergarten to every child in the state, and voters now passed the funding for our universal preschool initiative, which begins in 2023. No matter where you live, who you are, you get preschool. Now, the next steps that we take coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic really need to address a much broader spectrum, taking into account gaps that are persistent along geographic and racial and gender and income lines. We know that we can do better, and the more that we need to do is what we're here to discuss today. The 2020 report on equity in education really holds a mirror up to state policies and a lens on the historical drivers of the inequities that we know exist. When we're reflected back, we can see what's worked, and of course, more visibly, what hasn't worked, where learning or completion or training gaps have widened, what to do, and in many ways, what not to do. Importantly, this report is a plan of action created and strengthened by student leaders, state agencies, legislators, and community leaders. It's a broad vision to equip higher education leaders who are well-intentioned and want to solve this with the equity tools to strongly communicate the value of higher education and a climate that promotes success, a safe and resourceful learning environment for students, in many ways, not just regardless of their differences, but actually in celebration of their lived experiences, which are actually an asset to any institution and of course an asset to their classmates as well. Acknowledging that change is not asked of us, but is rather demanded of us is really critical. And that's in alignment with the executive order that I issued last August, directing the state workforce to implement equity, diversity, and inclusion practices. And in higher ed, for too long, too many Coloradans, too many Americans have been prevented from realizing their full potential. So now, as we pave the way to economic recovery and a brighter day, we have the opportunity to really build a dedicated lane for our students that accelerates growth, fast tracks opportunity in the areas that it hasn't historically reached. And today, with your support, with our support, we officially are setting this bold plan for action into motion. Thank you all for your leadership, and I look forward to hearing from you and holding an open dialogue and getting every idea we can on the table, and of course, your ideas on implementation of the report. Now I'll turn it back over to you, Angie.
Great. Thank you, Governor. Thank you, Governor. Thank you for your remarks, as always. And we know that your commitment to equity from the executive order all the way from preschool all the way through college and post-secondary into lifelong learning. So to make sure that our students are prepared for the workplace, and that means all of our students. And so thank you for your consistency in this regard. I will now introduce Representative Leslie Herod, who also is a champion for equity in so many ways, whether it's in police reform or in legislative reform or in economic reform, in so many different ways, social reform, to make sure that not just that it's a level playing field, but that people have what they need to succeed. And so Representative Herod.
Hello. Well,
Yes.
thank you. The honorables, people forget to say that sometimes. Angie Piccioni, it's so good to be here with you, Doctor. Before we get started, I just want to say how much as a young person, an aide and intern in the building, I admired watching you lead as a legislator in the building. So thank you so much for your service and commitment to Colorado. So for those of y'all who don't know me, I'm State Representative Leslie Herod. I represent House District 8, which is in fact in Denver, Colorado. I'm also the first African-American LGBTQ person to hold elected office in Colorado, and I'm a buff. And so I am proud now to serve on the Joint Budget Committee and to really work hand in hand with folks like Dr. Piccioni, as well as other folks who are on this call today to ensure that we really do prioritize education in our state funding. As someone who oversees the state budget where we prioritize our funding to align with our values, I will always advocate and encourage my colleagues to put equity first, especially with higher education funding. In Colorado, significant educational attainment gaps remain for Coloradans of color. 29.9% for Hispanic or Latinx folks, and 41.3% for African American or Black, and 29.9% for American Indian and Alaskan Native. These are the educational attainment gaps. And so they are huge within our communities, especially within the Black, Brown, and Indigenous communities. Now, these gaps have existed for generations and have persisted for decades. And while I think the state has worked hard and has put forward good initiatives to move forward on this work, we have not moved the needle enough. And it is something that you all just spoke about, but it's something that we should all be concerned about. This is not just about your zip code, though your zip code does play a part in it. It's not just about, how well you did in what grade level. It is also about race and ethnicity, and we've got to address it in that way. There's a stark contrast in Colorado and throughout the country about who has access, persistence, and who ultimately will succeed in higher education. But it's not because people of color or first generation or low income students don't want to do the work. In fact, it's because we have systems that are set up to inequitably and unfairly keep people from accessing that success. And so we applaud the work of the Department of Higher Education, the Equity Champions Coalition, for putting into place a roadmap to really move the needle on this quickly over the next 2 years. The department has established an Office of Educational Equity in 2020, but we know that more dedicated resources and leadership is critical. And so we are looking to move that forward in the Joint Budget Committee. Today, I'm asking my colleagues to join me and sign on to a letter and commit support to providing the necessary resources to make real progress in educational equity in Colorado. So I've got my trusty Governor Jared Polis signing pen. Can you see it? Everyone take out your pens. And I know my colleagues who are on this call also have their pens ready and the pledge in front of them. I'm trying to see who I can see. Oh, we've got the education chair here, chair of the Education Committee, Representative McLaughlin. We've got Senator James Coleman as well. Oh, and of course we have the wonderful Kathy Kipp. Representative Kipp also serves on the Appropriations Committee. So she's going to help sign that money across the finish line. And am I missing any of my other colleagues? All right. Okay. Here we go. We've got this letter of commitment up here. You can all see it and join us along. Now, you don't want me to read it, right? Because we all
Yes,
got that. You just want me to sign it.
do you have it, or would you like me to read it?
You know what? Why don't you go ahead and read it?
I'll read it, and then you can lead us in signing. It's the Educational Equity Day Letter of Commitment. Whereas significant educational attainment gaps remain for Coloradans of color, 29.9 for Hispanic or Latinx, 41.3 for African American or Black, 29.9 for American Indian and Native and Alaska Native. Whereas similar gaps exist when examining college going rates and workforce earnings. Whereas inequities not only exist by race and ethnicity, but also by gender, gender identity, income, ability, sexual orientation. Whereas the Equity Champions Coalition represents students and administrators committed to challenging the status quo. Whereas the ECC has dedicated hours of thought leadership and partnership to advance educational equity, and we applaud and honor their efforts. Whereas to create a Colorado for all, the Colorado Department of Higher Education and the ECC published the first ever report on educational equity in December of 2020. Whereas the report outlines recommendations for a brighter future by building on accomplishments and redirecting efforts to make change to better support students. Whereas the report provides practical improvement strategies to guide ongoing activities and establish measures of success and accountability structures to promote enrollment, persistence, and completion against equity gaps. Whereas leadership is an essential pillar of Colorado's equity work, and the higher education community must continue to stress the importance of equity. Whereas we must keep a focus on equity and set an example for others to follow, today we gather to sign and commit to the vision set in the report on educational equity. I hereby join Governor Polis and the state in designating March 15th, 2021 as Educational Equity Day. And here's the pen some of you received. I signed on to Educational Equity in Colorado 2021. Here we go.
One quick thing. I just saw Representative Young is on here as well, representing from Weld County. So good to see you on. All right, everyone ready to sign? Let's do it.
Woohoo!
It's done. Barbara has a longer name. Well, you guys, thank you so much for joining. Take a look around at my colleagues who are on this call. They are your champions for education, not just higher education, but education for our entire lifespan. And so they are the true champions. I just hope to be the one to sign the checks later on. So thanks so much for having me.
Thanks, Representative Herod.
Thank you, Doctor. I'll turn it back over to you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for leading your colleagues in signing this commitment. And we certainly know that you have been a leader in this field for so long. So thank you so much. And I would like to, can I introduce?
Interrupt. I'm sorry. I just wanted to acknowledge there were a few more legislators that were on camera. We're managing a lot of logistics behind the scenes. Dr. Piccioni is going to introduce one more guest, and then we will have the presidents come on and sign too. So just want to make sure. Thank you, everyone.
Fantastic. I'd now like to introduce the chair of the Colorado Commission on Higher Education, Vanecia Kerr, who has been our chair now for, I think, almost 2 years and has been on the commission for more than that, and has been a champion for equity for so long. Most recently led the college track, which is a program that helps young people achieve that degree. So Chair Kerr, please join us.
Great. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. All of the logistics, just as Shelley mentioned. Thank you so much for having me today. And thank you, Dr. Piccioni, for always serving as an incredible leader of our Department of Higher Education and leading such an incredible team in this effort for Equity Day of Dialogue. I am truly pleased and honored to be here today and to represent the Colorado Commission on Higher Education. It's so wonderful to see so many of us come together with a common goal of erasing equity gaps in our state and engaging in a dialogue on how to get there. The Commission reaffirmed its master plan for higher education in 2017. And during that time, we announced the goal number 2, which is to erase equity gaps. We've come so far, but one thing that we recognize is that it's more than just announcing a goal, that there has to be action behind it. So we recognize that we still have so far to go. Today is a day where we are having a day of dialogue around equity, and it's time for us to move the action further, as it was outlined in the report. It's time for us to take the necessary steps to make our higher education system accessible for all. So I, along with my fellow commissioners, stand in full support of our students, our colleges, our universities, in saying that we will continue to be leaders, advocates, and partners until all of our students have the same opportunities to pursue their dreams. So I am happy to sign on, as others have done already, as I have my pen as well, on the Educational Equity Day letter of commitment. And with that, I am happy to turn it over to Dr. Ryan Ross, who has been a long champion of equity and will continue to be one. And we are so very happy to pass it on to him as he represents our colleges and universities.
Good afternoon, everyone.
There you are.
First and foremost, I want to say thanks to Shelley and the team for all the logistics that are happening behind the scenes to make this day successful. I want to say thank you to the governor, Dr. Angie Piccioni, CDHE, all of the members of the ECC group. And I'm going to be brief for time because everything that needs to be said has been said. What I will say is today is significant because every day we have our colleagues who are on the ground, grassroots, seeing students day in and day out, really doing this work and making sure that we have environments where students can thrive. And it's really important that those individuals see that our leadership is being unapologetic, intentional, and committed to the diversity, equity, and inclusion work that needs to happen on our campuses to ensure that Colorado is a place where every student has the opportunity to thrive. And so with that being said, I want to say, presidents, wherever you are, I don't know how we are getting 36 people to a signing room for you to sign, but pull out your pens.
Turn on your cameras.
Turn on your cameras. Our other community members and partners who are signing with you, pull those things out, pull out your equity commitment. And I very quickly want to just say thank you to the presidents of the Colorado Community College System who are signing a second pledge. We've done this internally and now we're doing this collectively with the state. And so thank you to CCCS presidents and all of the higher education CEOs for doing this really important work and taking this very important step forward in our equity goals. So sign, pens up, papers up, and let's go ahead and sign.
And after you've signed, go ahead and hold it up, and then we might be able to get a couple of screenshots with, make sure your face is there and your signature is there. Got to get it right in front of you if you got a background. Who's getting that screenshot? Katrina, Shelley, somebody getting a screenshot? All right. Woohoo. I didn't use a Sharpie. I should have used a Sharpie. That's just a joke.
Well, let's give our presidents and everybody a quick round, and then we're going to transition on to what's next. So give yourselves a round, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you, presidents. I think we have David is next for students. Is that right, Shelley?
That's correct.
Thank you, presidents. Always good to see you. Thanks for signing on. David, Olguin. Can't hear you. Unmute yourself, David.
There we go. Hi, I'm David Olguin. I am the co-chair for the Equity Champions Coalition. And I just want to say thank you to the leadership that has gathered here today. And I also wanted to commend students for their commitment to driving equity on campuses throughout Colorado. We must have shared governance, and it is our hope that with this public declaration to equity that our institutions of higher education will develop mechanisms that amplify student voices and the vernacular histories of students of color. We, as students, want to know that we belong on campus. We want to see ourselves represented in faculty that look like us, share our experiences, perspectives, and humanity. Now, if we could have the students go ahead and sign the Equity Pledge along with the other leaders that have been highlighted today. Great, and thank you for your ongoing commitment. And I'll go ahead and toss this back to Shelley.
Great, we have just one final acknowledgement. These are community partners that have joined us along the way and have already committed prior to the signing. So I'm going to share my screen just to recognize those folks as well. Great. And while you look at those, I'm going to transition it back to Dr. Piccioni for closing. Really appreciate everyone kind of envisioning and imagining everyone coming up onto a stage, doing a signing in this virtual world. So we wanted to just make sure too that we acknowledged all of our legislators that were on the call. And so maybe if that's okay, I just want to make sure I acknowledge all of those legislators that have joined. Great. So give me just a moment as I pull up my list.
While you're pulling up the list, I do want to publicly thank you, Shelley, for not only leading this effort, but leading this day and making it all run smoothly, even with some technical difficulties. And the team that you assembled to do this, including Katrina and Spencer in the background. Maria, I think, was in the background. There's quite a few people in the background running slides and doing things. So thank you to the entire team at DHE for making this happen. This is how change happens, with so many people working together collectively, yet this is only the start. As Representative Harrod indicated, we do need to make sure that we secure the funding for the position of Chief Educational Equity Officer, someone who can really oversee the work that's being done at our campuses and really coordinate efforts so that we are all moving together forward faster. I think there's a proverb, a saying that says, if you want to go far, if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go together. And so that's what we want to do, is go together so that we can really see not just incremental slight changes that we can't even attribute to any particular intervention, but big changes in this equity gap so that we can make sure that all of Colorado students can succeed in Colorado, that it is a place truly for all. So that's our goal. We are happy to have the legislature and the governor in support of this initiative. Continuing in our day of dialogue, we do have one final question in Mentimeter. So here's the question: thinking about your sphere of influence and your role, what are you going to do to continue this conversation? I believe that's going to be on the Mentimeter slide. So if you still have the link, you can click on that link and go ahead and type in, what will you do to continue this conversation? It cannot, it must not end here with just this one day of declaration and one proclamation and signing on to a commitment. We have to continue the great work we've been doing and accelerate that work so that all of our students truly have the ability to succeed in Colorado. So as the slide is up, please answer that question. In the meantime, as you're doing that, Spencer Ellis, our Director of Innovation and Education, also had an eye on the Q&A. We're going to give him a chance to join us. We have about 10 minutes, and we want to give him a chance. Maybe you could take about 7.5 minutes to help us with any of those pertinent questions, Spencer. So here are some things that you're going to do. Move the needle in my sphere, great. Kicking the proverbial door back open, fighting for access to all, great. Hold leadership accountable, that's great. Hold us accountable too. We don't want to just say the words, we want to make sure we have the actions behind it. Great, thank you for these answers. Really appreciate it.
And I would love to recognize our legislators now. I wanted to make sure that I had the list exactly right. So thank you for your patience. We today had with us, in addition to Representative Harrod, we had Representative Barbara McLaughlin, Representative Kathy Kipp, Representative Daphne Michelson-Jeanette, Representative Donald Valdez, Senator James Coleman, Senator Jeff Bridges, Representative Jennifer Bacon, Representative Julie McCluskey, Representative Mary Young, Senator Paul Lundeen, and Senator Story. We thank you all for joining us today and signing the pledge, and thank you for allowing me time to make sure that I had my list correct.
Great. And thank you for your commitment to really making sure that Colorado leads in our interventions like concurrent enrollment and making sure that we have access for everyone. So thank you for, I know what it's like to be a legislator, so I know what it means to also be on this. So thank you for your time and your commitment. Question now is, do we use Flipgrid now, or are we going to Q&A now?
Yeah, let me make sure that Spencer is on, and if not, I will read some of the Q&A.
Okay.
There he is.
Hey there. Yeah, thank you, everybody. So Angie, I think I was just gonna share some of the themes that we were seeing from some of the Q&A.
Great.
And Shelley, feel free to jump in if there's anything. One of the comments was around the importance of data and really digging into the data, and even people volunteering ideas for how we might dig further into the data and how important that could be in really addressing. I think Representative Herod had mentioned, moving the needle. We all say that, and so a lot of people had kind of suggested that. There was another theme around language, the language of inclusion, other language that's used, in some of our common everyday vernacular, and suggestions for building a more inclusive environment by using more inclusive language. So I think that those were two themes that we saw come up. And then there were some other suggestions around, continuing to elevate the really important voices and to act on those. So suggestions on specifics within kind of the portfolio of work from the Department of Higher Ed, but also so many other parts of education. So lots of great themes and commentary. Shelley, I don't know what else you would add.
Of course, there's always the question around funding. We all know that it takes extra funding to make sure that we all have the services, those wraparound services that are necessary. By the way, they're necessary really for all students, not just students of color or low-income students. These services are necessary for all students. And so we know that the institutions not only need the funding to do that, but also have to make some tough decisions about how they prioritize their budgets. And they have been doing that. And so we commend you for that. And we hear you about the, if you will, some of the apparent inequities in funding at our institutions. We are working on it. I saw that in the Q&A as well. And in terms of language, it's really important. And it is hard because sometimes the language changes, and we will try to stay on top of the changes in the language so that we can make sure that people are respected and valued and they hear it in our language as well. I was a basketball coach, so I have a tendency to say you guys. I also come from New York, and that hasn't left even though I've been here 36 years. So I'm working on it. We're all working together. So have a bit of grace for those of us who are continuing in the journey to make sure that our language is as equitable as our heart and our intentions. Spencer, are we doing Flipgrid, or are we not doing Flipgrid, or?
The Flipgrid is a way for all of our attendees. It was in the pre-email, but it will also be included in the post-email.
Okay,
this is
great.
a way for you to go on and share your ongoing comments. It's sort of like a board, just an online board where you can post a video with some feedback. And we plan to use all of that as a way to carry these future conversations forward. I acknowledge that there were some comments about where's the dialogue. These were our tools for us to have a dialogue, but also protect our spaces, our Zoom space, from anyone who may be causing harm or bringing messages that are not appropriate. So we continue to go there.
We will continue the dialogue. This is just the first day of it, but we're going to continue the dialogue. We will have opportunities and spaces for your voice to be heard. We also want to highlight another event that's happening this week, Virtual Voices from the Denver Metro Chamber Leadership Foundation with Dr. Ryan Ross and Dr. Michael Benitez. We're adding a link to register for that event. It should be in the chat. The link for that, the event is on March 18th. The session, Breaking Down Systemic Racism, will break down at a high level and give the audience a deeper understanding of the complexities of institutional and systemic bias. The audience will also leave with tools on how to recognize and work to transform these systems. That's critical, that you will actually leave with some tools, because in this work, there's a lot of talk about attitude and awareness and even knowledge, but there's not enough on skills in developing these tools. So I'm happy to hear that there will be tools that you can leave with that. I already thank Shelley and the team. I want to thank all of you for your participation, for the dialogue and support today. Your voice matters. And in what you've contributed today and what you will do when you go back to your communities and contribute there. Remember, today is the first step toward action. Leave today thinking about what your next steps will be. How does this impact your daily work? How can you share these resources with your community? Remember, leadership is an essential pillar of Colorado's equity work. We need you to help make the change for our students of today and our students of tomorrow. So you are vital to this work, to the success of this work. Keep on keeping on. As my mom used to tell me when I was a little girl, keep on keeping on in this work. We need that perseverance. Thanks again, everyone. Thank you for being here. Have an amazing week. We will see you on the next dialogue.